Well, doing some brewing again today, and this time I'm trying out an experiment with some homemade wine using grape juice, which I've done before. And the thing about homemade wine, especially doing it the easy way like this with store-bought juice, is it's pretty difficult to get a decent product out of it. When it comes to brewing different things, cider I find is the easiest. You can make an excellent cider with practically no effort, and I have a video about that on my channel if you haven't already seen it. It's the best, fastest, and easiest cider recipe or something like that. It's in a couple of parts explaining it. Beer, you can make a really good beer at home. It's a lot more work than the cider, but you can make an excellent product. With wine, on the other hand, it's pretty hard to make a good wine. You can put a ton of time into it, learning how to do it, and buy all kinds of equipment and additives and all kinds of things, and go through the laborious process of the various steps of fermentation and putting different things in it and bottling and aging and all of that. And perhaps in time, with a lot of practice, you might eventually rise to the level of mediocrity. Not that we have so lofty a goal as that today, but basically the point being, with homemade wine, you kind of have to manage your expectations a bit. It's not going to be a really good wine. Doing it like this, it's not going to make anything that tastes like a nice Merlot or Pinot Noir or something like that. But I am going to try to get a little closer to that than I have previously. And kind of like my cider recipe, where I have different things I put in, and I put the tea bags in it, the raisins, dried fruit, yeast nutrients, specific yeast, all different things that all in their way make it a better product than what the recipe looks like. The recipe looks like a prison wine recipe, but all these different ingredients in there make it come out really good when it all works together. I'm going to try to do a similar thing here, and I'm going to use some ingredients that I've never used before, some of these additives that winemakers use, like wine tannin and a wine acid blend. I'm using a recipe here for a Welch's grape juice wine that I found on the internet, which calls for a gallon of grape juice, a cup of sugar, a teaspoon of yeast nutrient, a teaspoon of the acid blend, a quarter teaspoon of the tannin, and a wine yeast. I'm going to do 2 batches today with 2 different yeasts, just as kind of an experiment to see how they come out. One of them is a Red Star Premier Classique, which used to be known as Montrachet. You'd see it recommended a lot for recipes like this. Bit of a dry fermenting yeast, I guess, from what I understand. This one is a 71B, which I have used before, and I've usually always seen it called 71B 1122. When I bought this, it just says 71B on it. I guess it's the same thing, I hope. So we'll get into it. And so this is pretty simple. Put my sugar in first. I'm not even heating up anything for this. Okay, this might take a bit to get the sugar through the funnel. And I'll put the juice in now, and what I'm using is just some of this Great Value brand grape juice. Looking at the ingredients, it's exactly the same as the Welch's grape juice. And I forgot to mention about my other little ingredients and additives that I'm putting into this to improve the flavor. I'm going to add in some cranberry juice. So this is a 3-liter bottle for a 1-gallon batch, so I'll put in about 1 liter or a little less of the cranberry juice, which will maybe make a winier flavor, because the thing with this is it's made with Concord grapes, which has that very in a wine, it makes an unpleasantly grapey flavor. The adjective that serious wine people use is foxy. Um, so you make a wine out of this expecting it to taste like a wine that you would buy, and you'll find that it still kind of tastes like grape juice. So I'm going to shake this now to try to combine the sugar. So we'll add in some of that cranberry juice. I kind of now regret not getting like a cranberry cherry or cranberry pomegranate, but we'll try it with just cranberry juice and see how that does. This recipe calls for a teaspoon of the acid blend. This is an LD Carlson acid blend. Contains food grade citric, malic, and tartaric acid. I got this on eBay. The tannins also. Both of these were around $5 for a package for 2 ounces of this and 1 ounce of the tannins. And I've been kind of resistant to using stuff like this before. It just adds to the expense, and I always, try to do things not only as cheaply, but I guess sort of naturally, I guess you could say, as possible. But, in the interest of experimentation, I figured I would just try some of this and, see if it makes it better. Maybe this will make a really nice wine. And we'll put in a 1/4 teaspoon of wine tannin, which it says on here is from chestnut wood, which is interesting. But here goes a 1/4 teaspoon. In my ciders, I usually just use some tea bags to get some tannin in it. So I'll give this another shake to combine now. It looks like the sugar was all dissolved in. I don't see it settling back out. I'll get that other stuff mixed in. And I guess I'll put some yeast in here now. We'll do the 71B in this one. After this, I'll do another batch the same way with the Montrachet or Premier Classique, whatever they call it now. But it'll be the same thing, so I guess you don't really need to see it twice. But I'm just going to put in a sprinkle of that right into there. Never had a problem doing it that way. So I'll give it another shake to mix that in. We'll just top that off with the cranberry juice now, and I won't even bother with a funnel. This is kind of foamy looking, so hopefully this doesn't make a mess. I'll top that off a bit more after the foam goes down, but in the meantime, just put the cap on loosely and set that aside, and that's basically done. Well, it's the next morning now with the wine, and this one with the Premier Classique yeast in it is fermenting vigorously. Bubbled over a little bit last night. You can see the bubbles coming up the side. The other one is not doing as much yet with the 71B yeast. There's definitely some activity in there, but it looks about the same as it did last night. So this 71B batch has still been real slow to take off. This is now in the afternoon of the second day. You can see the Classique batch is bubbling away. And this one kind of just has this real, where's my finger? Like a real slow roll of bubbles, just barely kind of moving. So, you know, some of that yeast is apparently doing a little something in there, but maybe not enough. So I put in some more yeast, and I've now used maybe at least 2/3 of this packet, which is supposed to be good for 5 gallons. Of course, some people might say, you know, you should have hydrated it in water first, which is what the directions are on most wine yeasts, and you might be right. You know, I've never had a problem just putting the yeast directly into the stuff before, straight out of the package, but maybe it should be hydrated. Although I have used this 71B before, and I don't remember doing that, but you never know. Also, you know, when you go on eBay and get the very cheapest one you can find of the particular kind of yeast you're looking for, which is what I do, you're not necessarily getting the best one, so I don't know, maybe it was a little old or not stored in good conditions or something, but it should pick up pretty soon and get going. And if worst comes to worst, I'll put some of that classique yeast in this one and ferment it off. Look at this stuff. It's climbing out of the jug. It's going to crawl out of there and run away on me. I had to loosen up the caps a little bit because it was getting gummed up with the foam and building up pressure. So I loosened it. I don't know what is going on with that. This one is definitely catching up now. See, it's fermenting good. Alright, so I'm finally about to wrap things up with the wine video here. It's been a little over a month. I first started this, mixed these up on May 15th, I think, and today is June 21st. And these things actually were actively fermenting for most of that time. It was pretty incredible. There was just continuously bubbles coming up in there. I've never seen anything ferment that long. So I'll try them out. I'm going to start with the Classique because I believe that's going to be the drier of the two, so it probably makes sense to start with that one. But I'm going to just pour straight out of these jugs. They've been this whole time just in these jugs with the lids cracked a little bit. Although actually for the last couple of weeks I've actually, you know, I closed the lids tight to check for fermentation to see if they, you know, hissed at all when I would open them up, and they haven't for a while. But there we are. Pretty decent color to it. I'm kind of surprised. Usually this kind of homemade wine from juice like this comes out more kind of washed out looking, and it also looks nice and clear. Kind of surprised about that, but we'll give it a taste. Interesting. It is pretty dry, with a bit of a sour note to it. It's interesting. At first, it's the grape. It's that grape juice flavor that hits you, and then you get the wave of dryness and astringency, and then all of a sudden it's all cranberry. Kind of weird. You know, it still has that the foxiness of the Concord grapes, but the cranberry did balance that out somewhat. It still tastes like a homemade grocery store wine made from cheap grape juice and cranberry juice, but it's pretty good. And I do think also that acid blend and tannins contributed to that and definitely improved it over just doing it with just juice and sugar and yeast. I was expecting to not like this one as much, but it is very drinkable. And like I was saying at the very beginning of the video about managing expectations, it still tastes nothing like a nice wine that you pick up at the liquor store. But for what it is, it's not bad. So we'll try the 71B now. A bit of a richer and softer flavor to it, although less of the fruit in it really, which is interesting. And it looks kind of the same. Maybe not quite as clear, although maybe that's just my imagination. In the glass, it doesn't have as much of an aroma. And it's a little sweeter, but not much. Actually, pretty much the same flavor, but with less astringency. I was expecting to like this one more, but I'm not sure that I do. It's not as sharp and as clean tasting as the one made with the Premier Classique. It does maybe, in a way, it goes down a little smoother, or it's a little smoother on the tongue, sort of. And there is not as much of a difference between the grape flavor and the cranberry flavor. It's somewhat more blended together, the two of them. It kind of hits you all at once at the same time, unlike the other one, which kind of hits you with the grape flavor first, and then the cranberry character really comes through as that astringency gets you. Also not bad, but surprisingly, I think I like the Classique yeast better. Strong terroir, as they say, of Walmart. Some good cheese pairings would be maybe some Velveeta or Kraft singles, and would also go well with your microwave frozen pizzas or chicken tenders. So again, not a great wine, but a pretty good homemade wine.